The date was September 3rd, 1260. A thunderous rumble echoed across the dusty plains of Palestine, as 20,000 Mongol warriors charged forward, their composite bows glistening in the morning sun. For the past 40 years, no army on earth had managed to halt their relentless advance. They had decimated China, obliterated Persia, and left Baghdad in smoking ruins. Their target now was a small spring known as Ain Jalut, and they anticipated that Cairo would soon fall into their hands. Yet, unbeknownst to them, Mamluk commander Baybars observed the approaching horde from the hills above with a calculating gaze. He was aware of something the Mongols did not. Today, they were about to walk directly into one of the most devastating traps in medieval warfare. To comprehend why this day would mark the graveyard of Mongol invincibility, we must first look at the two formidable military systems at play. The Mongol war machine epitomized efficiency wrapped in sheer terror. Each warrior could unleash an astonishing 20 arrows per minute from horseback, while maintaining formation at full gallop. The Mongolian military was organized using a decimal system, structuring armies into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, allowing for seamless communication across the battlefield through flags, horns, and mounted messengers. What truly made them unstoppable, however, was their psychological warfare. When Mongol scouts appeared on the horizon, entire cities surrendered without a fight. Why? Because the terror of their reputation preceded them. Resist the Mongols, and they would annihilate every living soul within your walls. Submit immediately, and you might live to see another day as their subject. This strategy had allowed them to conquer lands stretching from Korea to Hungary. In 1258, their might was demonstrated vividly when they utterly destroyed Baghdad, the jewel of the Islamic world. Hulagu Khan's forces executed the caliph by rolling him in carpets and trampling him under hooves, leaving a clear message: nothing could withstand Mongol might. The Mamluks, on the other hand, were a different breed entirely. These were not conscripted peasants or feudal knights fighting for land and honor. Rather, they were warrior slaves, abducted as children from the steppes and Caucasus Mountains and subjected to the most rigorous military training in the medieval world. From the age of 7, Mamluks were focused solely on mastering warfare. They practiced archery until they could split arrows while galloping at full speed, and trained with swords until their blade work became instinctive. But what was crucial was their expertise in the art of coordinated cavalry charges capable of decimating infantry formations. The tactical genius of Baybars, the year 1260, presented a dire situation for the Islamic world. Hulagu Khan held dominion over everything from Iran to Syria, with his lieutenant Kitbuka commanding an advancing force tasked with eliminating the Mamluk Sultanate and securing Mongol control over the Middle East. Sultan Qutuz understood the brutal mathematics at play. The Mongols had never lost a major battle. They commanded superior numbers, better logistics, and 40 years of psychological momentum. Previous Islamic armies had crumbled under their approach, but Qutuz held one critical advantage the Mongols had never encountered: commanders who thoroughly understood their tactical patterns. Baybars had studied the Mongol methods intimately during their conquest of Syria. He noted their preference for drawing enemies into open terrain where their speed and mobility would be decisive. He recognized their overconfidence in pursuing retreating forces, an approach that had earned them countless victories. Most importantly, Baybars identified the one scenario in which Mongol advantages became serious vulnerabilities: broken terrain, where their formations could not maintain cohesion and pursuit became channeled rather than fluid. The stage was set for what would become one of the most consequential battles of the 13th century. On one side, an empire with a history of invincibility, led by generals who had conquered half the known world. On the other, elite slave warriors defending the last significant Islamic power, steered by a commander willing to stake everything on a single, desperate gamble. The battle begins on that fateful dawn over Ain Jalut. Baybars prepared to execute his master plan. The Mongol vanguard, under Kitbuka, crested the hills overlooking the springs, their horses snorting in the cool morning air, and spotted what they expected: a Mamluk force of around 3,000 cavalry near the water source, positioned in loose formation. Kitbuka smiled. He believed this would be over by midday. As the Mongols descended into the valley, they adopted their standard battle formation: heavy cavalry at the center, light archers on the flanks, and reserve units ready to exploit any breakthroughs. It was the same tactic that had crushed armies from Beijing to Budapest. But as they approached bow range, something unexpected occurred. The Mamluk commander raised his banner and turned his horse around. The entire Mamluk force began to retreat, but this was no sign of panic. It was an eerily organized withdrawal. Baybars was beginning the performance of a lifetime. He had designed a retreat so psychologically brilliant that it played into the very essence of Mongol tactics. Mongol doctrine emphasized that retreating enemies were vulnerable and must be pursued, each pursuer trained to capitalize on the scattered remnants of a broken enemy. Kitbuka had witnessed this tactic succeed innumerable times before. Past battles, like Mohi and Lenica, had seen Mongol forces decimate fleeing opponents. But Baybars had a keen understanding of Mongol psychology. The confidence of the Mongols in pursuing retreating foes was born from a history of fighting enemies that fled in genuine panic. The Mamluk retreat moved at just the right pace, fast enough to suggest fear, yet slow enough to remain tempting. Baybars kept his formations intact but loose, creating the appearance of an army striving to maintain discipline while falling back under pressure. As the Mongols surged into the valley, their lighter cavalry raced ahead to engage the fleeing Mamluks, firing volleys of arrows toward them. Some arrows struck their marks, toppling Mamluk warriors from their saddles. The sight of their casualties only reinforced Kitbuka's belief that this was a genuine retreat. The Mongolian formation began to extend, losing the tight coordination that made them such a devastating force as faster units raced ahead, leaving slower ones behind. Baybars maintained the illusion flawlessly. His rear guard fought just hard enough to seem desperate but managed to encourage further pursuit. After 3 miles into the valley, Kitbuka made a catastrophic mistake. Seeing what looked like a disintegrating enemy force, he committed his reserves to the chase. The entire Mongol army stretched thin across the valley floor, entirely focused on the retreating Mamluks ahead. That was when Baybars triggered the trap. Hidden in the hills on both sides of the valley, 2 massive Mamluk formations had been lying in wait, resolute in their silence. Sultan Kutuz commanded the eastern force of nearly 5,000 heavy cavalry, while Baybars' lieutenant led the western group of another 4,000 mounted warriors. At the prearranged signal, both forces erupted from their concealment, catching the Mongols completely off guard. The devastating counterattack, the psychological impact was overwhelming. One moment, the Mongols were chasing a defeated enemy through a barren valley. The next, they found themselves ensnared by fresh cavalry charging from 3 directions simultaneously. Mongolian battlefield communication, typically so effective in open terrain, broke down in the ensuing chaos. Unit commanders, deprived of visibility through the dust and noise, were unable to relay commands or coordinate effectively. In that tumultuous moment, the Mongol system that allowed them to coordinate armies across such vast distances became utterly ineffective. Surrounded and disoriented, the Mongols faced the true might of the Mamluks, a group that had trained specifically for combat scenarios just like this one, close quarters and mounted warfare, where individual skill was paramount. The brutal melee that ensued favored Mamluk warriors, who systematically dismantled their opponents. Their heavier armor mitigated the effects of Mongol arrows, while their superior swordsmanship carved through the disorganized Mongolian lines. Most importantly, the Mamluk horses were specifically trained for the chaos of cavalry combat, in stark contrast to Mongol mounts bred for speed and endurance. Kitbuka realized his catastrophic miscalculation too late. As the veteran commander struggled to rally his scattered forces, the tactical situation spiraled into hopelessness. Surrounded and outnumbered, the Mongol army began to crumble under the relentless pressure. When Kitbuka fell, pierced by a Mamluk lance, the remnant of Mongol resistance collapsed entirely. Aftermath and consequences, the survivors who escaped the valley bore phrases of more than mere defeat back to Damascus. They carried the death of a notion that had dominated the medieval world for 4 decades. For the first time since Genghis Khan united the Mongol tribes a major, Mongol army had been utterly destroyed in open battle, not defeated through siege or guerrilla tactics, but annihilated in a direct confrontation where Mongol supremacy was assumed to be absolute. The strategic ramifications rippled across 3 continents within months. In Europe, where kings had prepared for an inevitable Mongol invasion, the news triggered celebrations from Paris to Vienna. The once unstoppable force had at long last met its match. In the Islamic world, the victory at Ain Jalut ignited a renaissance of resistance. Cities that had submitted to Mongol rule began to rally, expelling their occupiers. Local commanders rediscovered the courage to defy Hulag's authority. But beyond mere politics, the psychological impact resonated even deeper. The Mongol Empire had founded its expansion on one simple premise: resistance was futile, for Mongol victory was an inescapable fate. That belief met its demise in the dust of Ain Jalut. Hulagu Khan, upon receiving the news of the disaster from his capital in Iran, faced an impossible decision. He could commit the remaining forces for vengeance against Kitbuka's defeat, risking Chinese rebellions in his eastern territories. Alternatively, he could consolidate his conquests and accept that Mongol expansion had reached its limits. Ultimately, he chose consolidation. The Mongol war machine that had propelled itself from the Pacific Ocean to the Mediterranean sea ground to a halt at the borders of Egypt. What set Ain Jalut apart from the previous setbacks faced by the Mongols was its clear-cut nature. They had suffered defeats before bad weather during invasions, overextended supply lines in Eastern Europe, political turmoil following a great Khan's death. Ain Jalut, however, offered no such excuses. It showcased perfect weather, adequate supplies, a unified command structure, and seasoned troops under an experienced general. The Mamluks had simply outfought them using superior tactics and training. This monumental clash demonstrated that Mongolian military dominance was not based on supernatural invincibility, but on tactical advantages that could be countered with the right opponent. Baybars had identified those vulnerabilities and exploited them with devastating precision. Within a generation, the once unified Mongol Empire fractured into competing khanates: the Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, the Yuan dynasty, and the Chagatai Khanate, all claiming legitimacy, but none possessing the overwhelming military superiority that had birthed Mongol conquests. The age of Mongol expansion had drawn to a close, and the age of Mongol decline had begun. It all commenced in the valley of Ain Jalut, where one brilliant commander proved that even the world's most feared army could be dismantled by the right trap at the right moment. September 3, 1260, would be remembered as the day tactical genius triumphed over military reputation. Baybars achieved what no general before him had accomplished, turning Mongol strengths into fatal weaknesses through masterful deception and flawless execution. If you're intrigued by how this stunning victory shaped the rise of the Ottoman Empire, be sure to watch this next video. Subscribe for more captivating tales of battles where brilliant strategy changed the course of history.